What's up? Damn happy to share with you one of the funniest opening variations really. And it's funny for lots of different reasons. One of them is this is the opening variation where lots of strong players got in a losing position as black in just 3 moves, which is crazy to think about it. Secondly, it's one of the openings that people completely misunderstand and a lot of them just don't know it, and those who know it usually misunderstand it, which gives you great chances to get a lot of awesome victories with it within just a couple of variations that you need to know. Anyway, let me reveal what I'm talking about. So you start off with the move pawn d4. If you don't play this move commonly, don't worry, because you don't have to study Queen's Gambit or anything like that. We'll narrow it down to just one system. So after d5 or knight f6, you play the same move knight to c3 here. This potentially prepares to go e4 and grab the center, so black responds with knight f6, and here comes the move bishop f4, which marks the beginning of the so-called Jobava London system. And somehow, within the last couple of years, after the Georgian grandmaster Baadur Jobava popularized the system on high level, people started considering this to be something highly creative, highly unknown, and like out of this world opening, which I could never understand honestly. Like, if you look at this current position, it is actually a mirrored Italian game, isn't it, right? We mirror it. And all the white's moves so far are just so common. These are like the most standard moves ever, right? Play knight c3, bishop f4. So I could never really comprehend why people consider this something groundbreaking. Anyway, for some reason, people have no idea how to play here and often get in trouble. In fact, one of the most common reactions of black here is playing the move knight to c6, which gives black a losing position straight off. By the way, if they develop the knight to d7, that leads to similar variations. And in fact, it's quite common. I've noticed that whenever you surprise your opponents and they don't know what to do, very often they start mimicking your moves. So you play knight c3, they don't know what to do, they just play the same knight to c6. But this fails to realize that, again, we're playing kind of the mirrored Italian game, remember that. So you win with the kind of mirrored right liver attack with knight to b5, right, hitting the square, and black has no sufficient defense. So that's how you get in the winning position in 3 moves. And here after knight takes c7, you would fork the king as well as the rook, therefore it's pretty significant threat. And the only way for black to parry this would be to give up a pawn by playing pawn to e5, but here the fun continues. You can grab this pawn, renewing the threat, which will probably force black to trade off here. Now pawn takes, attacks this knight, and after the knight goes to whatever square, e4, g4, d7, doesn't really matter, there is another shocking move here that comes to completely ruin black's position and self-confidence, which is queen takes d5. What the heck? You still keep shocking black from the first move till the last move of this game. It appears as if you blundered the queen, but it's not the case, because if black captures it, you now play knight takes c7, you force that move anyway, forcing the king to move, and it turns out that this is a fork to the queen and king. So after something like king d8 and knight takes d5, with this quick crushing attack, you gobbled up 3 pawns, expose the king, so in the future you'll probably castle queenside, keep attacking it, plus you have a ton of extra pawns and a completely winning position. Okay, let's explore a couple other options. If black chooses to play knight f6 on the first move, that doesn't change anything for you. You still play all the same moves. Knight c3, you're still threatening to play e4 and grab the center, which will force black to play d5, and that transitions into the very same variation, bishop to f4. Now, we already know that black's got to be careful about this threat, and therefore knight to c6 loses the game on the spot, basically. It's the most common for black to play pawn to e6 here. Then you respond pawn to e3, also just developing, and in this position very often black play the move pawn to c5. Again, very standard for the Queen's Gambit, generally speaking, makes a lot of sense. This pawn is supported by the bishop, therefore black wants to attack your center, but it kind of fails again to knight b5. In this case, you're not like winning the game completely, but you're just getting a very comfortable attacking position. So knight b5 creates obviously the very same threat. Black can parry it with the move knight to a6, but here after pawn to c3, you get kind of something similar to the London system. Remember, it's called the Jobava London System, referring to the similarities with the London system. But here, in contrast to the usual London system, you've got this strong knight on b5, which controls these 2 squares, not allowing black to move freely. Also, this knight on a6 is a classical example of the knight on the rim, which is dim. As you can see, it has nowhere to go, really. All these squares are under the control of white, so the knight is a really sad piece. Moreover, on top of that, black usually feels annoyed with this situation. They try to do something, which makes things worse for them. They play bishop d7, kind of putting pressure to this knight, which is not really the case as the knight is already defended, but nevertheless you may overprotect it with the move pawn a4 just so that you never blunder it, and you feel absolutely safe about this knight. And after that, black once again feels kind of uncomfortable. They often take here on b5 anyway. Then you recapture with the bishop with the tempo hitting the king. Now they move their knight back, and here you play knight to f3. And this potentially creates the threat of knight to e5, taking advantage of this pin. Again, they're annoyed by your pieces, and the most common move for black here is the move knight to c7, which makes it completely loosened this time. Knight c7 is just a blunder. The thing is, although it attacks your bishop, but you can easily eliminate this knight, and after that you execute your threat knight to e5, and black is simply losing this knight, and after that you're going to attack his king as well, which completely destroys black's position. Now, why did I say that knight c7 was the wrong move for black? Remember, black had that knight on a6 in the past, so he could move it back to b8 and at least defend that knight in such an awkward manner, but at least to save the piece. But now without that knight on a6, that's not an option, and black is just losing. Is there any way out for black? Well, there must be. So let's analyze the situation where black plays the move pawn to a6 in order to stop you from jumping with this knight to b5, which caused so much troubles for black in previous variations. And after that, let's say you play this standard move pawn to e3, pawn to e6, and here, there are some nuances about this position, and if you're playing against a title player, maybe you may wish to play e3 to prevent this thing and to follow a particular order of moves, but I don't want to get into these nitty-gritty details of this variation because really, in 99% of the cases, you don't have to worry about that at all, unless you're playing against a title player who's really well-versed into this opening system. That'll usually not be the case. So just keep it simple, play simple moves knight f3. Now here, what can black play? If they go bishop d6, now the cool thing about this is that you don't have to react at all. Your bishop is already defended, so you can just ignore it and develop. And if black ever trades there, fine, right? In that variation, your knight will have this great outpost square on e5, life's good, so you don't have to worry about that. So bishop d6 is not really a big problem. If they go c5, that's what we're going to talk about. If they go bishop e7 first and then play c5, this will in fact lead to the same variations, just with a loss of a tempo, because after pawn takes, they'll bring their bishop to c5 in 2 moves instead of in 1. So that will be an inferior version of what we're going to talk about. So let's say they play pawn to c5 straight away, which is a good move for black. Now, there is a little problem for white here. Normally you'd wish to develop your bishop to d3, but here it doesn't feel good because black can play c4 and push your bishop back. So you have to kind of take here on c5 first to eliminate this, and after a bishop takes, then you play a bishop to d3, and here we get a more normal position of the Jobava London system, where both players play sound moves. Now both sides are developing, and here there is a key move, which is worth knowing, because that's the primary idea of your middle game plan here, is to break through in the center of the board with the move pawn to e4. Now your minor pieces are supporting this advancement, and this allows you to challenge black's center to put pressure on black, so now black has to worry whether you want to push e5 and attack this knight, or whether you want to take here and create an isolated pawn for black. So all in all, black already feels uncomfortable here. And there are a couple of variations which are really fun. One of them is playing pawn to d4. Now black hopes for your knight to go back, which is a fine move for white to play, but it's even better to play pawn to e5, confusing black right away. So he say, hey, you want to capture my knight? Fine, I'll capture yours. And black will probably have to go for this line anyway. And after this variation, the good thing for you is that you're trading off potentially your side pawn for his castling pawn. So if we continue capturing everything that we can, now we can also trade rooks, but at the end of the day, the material balance will be equal, but we managed to expose his king, which is fine. We'll be able to attack him later on in the middle game. So that looks dangerous for black. In most cases, however, black does not go for this. They think that it's much better to capture this pawn, keeping his castling intact, which is all good, besides one little thing. After bishop g5, it is resignable for black, because their queen suddenly is trapped there on f6. It's a very cool thing, cool tactics to remember, because lots of strong players even will fall for this trap. And it's even more common for black to commit a positional error, following our favorite rule to take as a mistake. They play pawn takes e4, which makes your life easier indeed. Now your knight gets centralized, attacks the bishop. So now they keep trading, which also brings your bishop to an active square now. And after that, the most common move for black is yet another error, which makes your positional advantage quite significant is queen takes d1. They think that by trading off pieces they reduce the power of your attack, but in fact, if you look at this position at the end of all these exchanges, black is nearly paralyzed. Like, he cannot really move this bishop out, it will be captured. He can't fianchetto the bishop that way, because if he moves the b-pawn forward, he'll lose the knight on c6. Generally speaking, your two bishops are exerting strong pressure around the entire board here, right? And again, it's not that easy even to find any decent move for black here, and you can keep attacking. So that's how you get just the dominant positional advantages. By the way, it's very common, because usually people don't really know what to do after an opening when there are no like straightforward threats that they can carry on. They're completely clueless. And so you can take advantage of them and just crush them. By the way, if you want to master that side of chess, I would recommend that you check out my course Top 25 Middle Game Concepts, where I narrow it down to those most important middle game plans, concepts that you gotta know, so that while your opponents are clueless of what to do once an opening has finished, you always have specific ideas in mind, you can just follow them and dominate your opponent. So again, if you're interested, you may click the link below the video and check it out. I hope the Jobava system will get the job done for you. If so, let me know in the comments below how it worked out for you, or if you have any questions, and I'll make sure to follow up. Talk soon, take care.